So in this video, we're going to look at how to evaluate trig functions with a calculator. So there's times when we use a calculator and there's times when we don't use a calculator when it comes to trigonometry. But oftentimes when we do word problems, which will probably be in the next video, we do need to use a calculator in order to evaluate whatever values we put into a trig function. So let's go ahead and look at an example, or a bunch of examples. And basically we want to evaluate each function. Alright, so we're going to start off with two kind of simultaneously. We have the cosine of 60 degrees and the sine of pi over 3. Alright, now the reason I'm doing this at the same time is because there's a part of this using a calculator that kind of goes with both of them. Alright, so first of all, we do need to know where our trig functions are. So we have the sine, cosine, and tangent, and we probably had those before. But the other part of it is we have to understand, now that we know radians, the calculator also has to know when we're in radians or degrees. So before you ever evaluate a trig function, you got to figure out, are you in degrees or radians? So the first one, we're in degrees, and to figure out whether or not the calculator is in degrees or radians, well, it depends on the calculator, but if you have a Texas Instrument, you go into mode, and if you see the third one down, right here, it says radian or degree. Now, degree is already highlighted, so I could use my arrows, go to degree, or move over degree, and hit enter, and it is highlighted again. So now that I'm in degrees, I can evaluate this particular function. The cosine of 60 is 0.5. So in that case, it's an exact answer. All right, now this one here, pi over 3, because it doesn't have a degree sign, it is in radians. So remember that, if you don't have the degree sign in there, it is radians. So we're going to have to actually go back into our mode and go down to radians and hit enter and make sure radians is now highlighted. So you can see how radians is highlighted, and then we can quit out of that. And now we can put in the sine, and when you do use the pi, make sure you use this pi button here. So pi divided by 3. And we get 0.8660. So it's an approximation. Good. Let's try one more, part C, using the keys we have. Actually, we're always going to use those keys, but you'll see here soon what I'm talking about, 0.93. So let's say we want to figure out what is the tangent of 0.93. First, we have to determine is that degrees or radians. Because there's no degree sign, it is radians, and we're already in radians because we changed it back here, so we can just take the tangent of 0.93, and we get approximately 1.3409. Good. All right, part D. Now let's look at a case where we don't have the sine, cosine, or tangent. Let's say we had the cosecant of 43 degrees. Right, so there's a lot of steps to this. Here's 43 degrees. So that means we do have to go back into degrees. So I'm going to go into my mode and select degrees. Then we need to figure out cosecant. Well, of course, when we look at our buttons here, we don't have a cosecant. We only have sine, cosine, and tangent. However, we do have our reciprocal identities. And we know that cosecant of 43 degrees is the same as 1 over the sine of 43 degrees. So if you ever have to evaluate cosecant, secant, or cotangent, you're going to have to remember your inverse trig functions, or the reciprocal identities. So let's go ahead and do that. We're going to take, well, there's a couple ways we can do this. We can say sine of 43, and then just hit there's a little reciprocal button right here, and hit the reciprocal of that, and we get 1.4663. You could also just say 1 divided by the sine of 43, and you get the same thing. So whichever way you want to do it is fine. Let's try another one of those. Let's say for part E, we want the secant of 2. All right, well, we know the secant, the reciprocal of secant is cosine, so we can rewrite this to be 1 over the cosine of 2. And let's see here, that doesn't have the degree sign, so it is in radians. We got to go back into radians. All right, and quit out of that. And we take 1 divided by the cosine of 2. And that's going to be a negative 2.4030. Good. All right, so it's not, super challenging to use this. And we've done this before. You've done it in previous classes, and when we did right triangle trigonometry, we used sine, cosine, and tangent. But part of the makes a difference is now we have radians, so you got to know which mode your calculator is in, degrees or radians, and we also have these reciprocal functions, and because we don't have a button for secant, cosecant, or cotangent, we have to use the reciprocal identities to help evaluate those. All right, so let's do a couple more. I'll put a little line here, even though it's kind of just continuing EF. Now we want to figure out what is the sine of 22 degrees, 37 minutes, 13 seconds. All right, so there's probably a couple of calculators out there that you can work with degrees, minutes, seconds, but most calculators, the trig functions, you cannot enter degree, minutes, seconds. You have to first put it into degree decimal. So what we need to do is we have to take the sine of 22 plus, then we have to remember how to convert to from DMS to degree decimal. So it's 37 over 60 plus 13 over 3600. Right. And then when we have that, we'll be good. And this is in degrees, so let's make sure we're in degrees. It did start off with that. So mode, get back into degrees. And I'm going to first do all this. So I'm going to have 22 plus 37 divided by 60 plus 13 divided by 3600. 22.620 blah 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 degrees. Now keep that in your calculator. We want to be as accurate as possible. So then what we do is we're going to take the sine of that answer. And we end up with 0.3846. Good. Let's try another one. EFG. Let's say we want the cosecant of 34 degrees, 30 minutes, 36 seconds. So got the same thing going here. So we first have to convert the degree, minutes, seconds to degree decimal. So we're going to have the cosecant of 34 plus 30 over 60 plus 36 over 3600. That looks like it's going to come out to be a nice number there. But we have cosecant, and we don't have a cosecant button, so we have to use the inverse, the reciprocal identity, and cosecant is the same as 1 over sine. So now we're going to have 1 over the sine of 34 plus 30 over 60 plus 36 over 3600. All right, so now we got a lot going on here. So let's see if we can do this. So we have 34 plus, what was it? 30 divided by 60, which is just 1/2, plus 36 divided by 3600, which is just 0.01. So 34.51 degrees, that's easy enough. and then we'll take 1 divided by the sine of our answer, and we get 1.7651. Good. All right, so here was a nice little I don't know if you guys knew how to use your calculator in this situation, but if not, it was a good video on how to use our calculator, and also the concept of our reciprocal functions and the difference between degree and radian, and making sure your calculator understands what mode we are in.